Hello there everyone, and welcome to the final build in this challenge series, the Mercenary. I know a lot of you were waiting patiently for this one, so I hope it lives up to your expectations. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and go back and watch the other builds in this series if you want to see the full story of these characters. The mid-year had not been good for jobs. The Mercenary had only completed a couple of contracts in the past few months, and his coffers had run dry. With only the gold in his pockets, he was willing to take up every job he was offered. He headed to the guardhouse in which he acquired the majority of his contracts, and was dismayed to see that, once again, nothing new had been posted. Feeling downtrodden, he headed to the local inn, hoping to drown his sorrows in whatever drink he could still afford. He was sitting at the bar, head in his hands, when the elf approached him. He was clad in a hooded black robe, and strode towards the Redguard with his head held high, and a sneer covering his face. He spoke quickly, offering the mercenary several jobs at once. A Dummer assassin, a Nord barbarian, and an Outlaw mage all needed to be brought in, dead or alive. The Redguard only half made out the details of the jobs, but once he sobered up, he found a handful of documents on his person, informing him of the targets, and what they had been doing recently. He browsed through the items while nursing a light hangover. After a few hours of research and poring over various maps, he was able to work out that all of the targets would most likely be in northern Cyrodiil. If he could bag the targets one after another, then he'd be in for one hell of a fast payday. The journey through Cyrodiil was a pleasant one. The weather was cool, and yet the sun still lit his path. By the time he reached the woods, he was in a good mood. Even without having his pockets full, he had been enjoying the peace of the countryside. As night drew in, he headed towards the sounds of merriment and the smells of food. He reached the campfire and was about to call forth with a greeting, until he saw who was sat there. All of his targets in one place at first seemed like a blessing, but there was no way he could fight them all at once. Add into the equation the fact that there were a half dozen others around the fire, and he knew he would instead have to bide his time. He sat down with the group and made small talk. They had all clearly been drinking, and were more than hospitable towards him, handing him a drink and asking him to join in with songs from his home. It was difficult to not enjoy himself. The mood at the camp was a joyous one, and it almost pained him to know that he would be turning almost half of them in within the next day or so. The following morning, the group came to the collective decision to travel north, into Skyrim. As they walked through the woods, the mercenary noticed that the group was starting to drift apart as they moved through the terrain. He planned to individually take out the targets, as quickly and quietly as possible, in order to bag them all at once without much of a fight. He spied the Nord walking in the distance, and drew his bow, nocking an arrow and lining up the shot. Before he was able to take it, a hand was placed gently on his shoulder, and his mind and body suddenly went limp. Sometime later, he awoke to the sight of a Falmor who had given him the contracts, explaining that he had done well to track down the targets, but that his services were no longer needed. Instead, his wrists were bound, and he saw the elf cast a spell that once again knocked him out. When he awoke this time, it was in the captivity of the Imperials, being led on a cart, headed for Helgen. The only skills available to the mercenary are one-handed, archery, destruction, block, alteration, and smithing. One-handed, archery, and destruction will give us a trio of offensive skills we can use. One-handed works best when up close and personal, destruction is good for the mid-distances, and archery is good at long range or as a ranged alternative to destruction when your Magicka runs out. Make sure to mix these up in order to get the maximum offensive power possible at all times. Although we have the block skill, we don't have heavy or light armour, which means we can't use a shield, as this would level those skills, which in turn would break the challenge rules. This means we will instead only be blocking with a weapon, and this doesn't help us much in the way of defence. Fortunately, it still allows us to bash though, which is a key element to close quarters combat with this build. Keep in mind that if you want to do infinite bashing, then just drink a vegetable soup and you'll get a tiny bit of stamina regen, which will let you do that for 8 minutes. Alteration is our main defensive skill, and will provide us with an armour rating. We don't have speech, so we can't buy spell tomes, but you've all been incredibly helpful in the comments, and told me about the Oak Flesh spell tome that you can get in Shroud Half Barrow, so there's at least one alteration spell you'll be guaranteed to be able to get. In terms of perks from this tree, in the late game, I would advise going for both magic resistance and mage armour, in order to eventually have much higher resistances. The final skill of this build is smithing. This actually kind of sucks for this build due to the lack of armour, but it does at least mean we can improve our weapons, to have them dealing more damage. In addition, you can also improve your followers' weapons and armour, in order to make them more powerful, which is at least one added bonus to the skill. When levelling with this build, I split evenly between health, magicka and stamina, in that order, as all three are important for the character. You need enough health that you won't just be one-shot in every encounter, you need a good supply of magicka in order to be able to cast multiple spells in every combat, and you'll also need a decent bit of stamina so you can stay mobile during the fight. As a standing stone for this build, I would probably go with the Lord Stone. In the interest of time, I just stuck with the Guardian Stones, but feel free to tell me in the comments below which stone you plan on using. I'd advise going defensive in order for a little bit of survivability, but you may instead want to go all out on the attack. I didn't have any powers I relied on whilst playing this build. The Redguard racial ability of Adrenaline Rush isn't that great, but is at least better than nothing, so keep in mind you can use it if you need a quick recharge of stamina while sprinting away. The weapons I used when playing with this build were Windshear and Zephyr. Both of these are incredible weapons, and surprisingly aren't actually that difficult to get hold of. Zephyr, you literally just need to pick it up, and although with Windshear you do have to pretty much complete the Dark Brotherhood storyline to get to it, none of the missions are that difficult to complete, as long as you're happy to go to jail every once in a while. Windshear has a stagger effect on it that lets you dominate against lone enemies. This is quite possibly the most powerful one-handed weapon in the game, and this build sure could do with the help it offers. Zephyr, on the other hand, isn't outright powerful, but it's insanely fast, letting you pepper the enemy with arrows faster than they can shoot back. You get taken down fast against accurate archers, so you want to be able to take them down before they can land a hit on you. The clothes that the Mercenary wears are the Hammerfell Garb, Redguard boots, and Shrouded Hood. The Shrouded Hood mixes up the standard Redguard look, and helps to make the character stand out more. None of these items particularly help out the character, but wearing all clothing does make us very light on our feet, so we can move around incredibly quickly. As always, make sure to get yourself a suitable ring and necklace in order to improve the character. There are plenty of good choices you can make with these from the items already in game, and I'm sure you will come across suitable random drops too. The main faction for this build is the Dark Brotherhood. Although this doesn't provide quite as much freedom as the freelance mercenary life, it does keep him busy with plenty of jobs, and a large intake of gold once they're completed. You'll also need to join them in order to get a fair bit of your equipment, plus it's just a fun faction to be a part of. In addition to this faction, you will want to complete any jobs you can that pay well. The mercenary doesn't really care too much what the job is, all that matters to him is that he gets paid at the end of it. As a follower for this build, I would recommend choosing your favourite mercenary. For me, this is Teldrin Sero, but I'm sure each of you have your own preferences on this matter. After getting turned on by his last employer, the mercenary will want someone around to watch his back. Sure, having to cash out the gold is a hell of a pain to him, but it's better to be light in the pockets than to be 6 foot under. The playstyle for this build is an interesting one. You have almost no defense, but you can dish out the damage incredibly well. Every encounter will be high stakes, and you will need to use your mind as well as your gaming skills in order to come out alive with every fight. If you do end up overwhelmed, then the best course of action is normally to run away. Fleeing from a fight may not be the best thing for your image, but he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. If you are determined to stick with the fight, then make sure that your follower is getting stuck in and keeping as many of the enemies distracted as possible, as you don't have a reliable way to deal with large groups all at once. To keep enemies at bay, make sure to bash them with Windshear, as this temporarily paralyses them and knocks them back a long way, so is incredibly powerful for separating large groups. Whatever you decide to do, keep in mind that you have 2 objectives with this build. make money, and stay alive long enough to spend it. Thanks to all of you for watching this video. I hope that all of my subscribers have enjoyed this set of challenge builds, and if you aren't already subscribed and haven't watched the others yet, then why not? If you enjoyed this video, you'll enjoy the others too. To show how much you liked it, why not click the like button? All the standard YouTube talk aside, I am truly grateful to all of you who watch my videos. Without all of you, these videos wouldn't be getting made, so it really does mean a lot. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.